Hi, my name is Katelyn Trammell, and I work at the University of Nebraska State Museum, and I care for the anthropology collections. If you have any questions about what I talk about today, please make sure to leave a comment or a question, and somebody will be able to get back to you in the thread. So, the University of Nebraska State Museum is in Nebraska, here smack dab in the center of the country. But I'm originally from Arkansas, and whenever I was a kid, I thought that I wanted to be a dentist. And then I took an anthropology course in college and realized that that was where I actually belonged. I still get to wear gloves, but I wear them for a different reason. So the reason we wear gloves in collections care is because our hands have destructive oils that can deteriorate our objects, and we want to make sure that we're taking care of them. And in the anthropology collection, the things that we collect are things from around the world and different human cultures, because anthropology is the study of how human cultures develop and how humans interact. And so we have collection objects from all over the world, about 40,000 objects total. And each object has specific needs for their preservation so that we can keep them safe for our visitors for many years to come. And so some objects only need support, some need individual cases, depending on what they're made of, or depending on what they're sitting with. All of those things are factors in how that we house them here in the collections. So one of the first objects I'm going to show you is a parfleche. So parfleche is made out of animal hide and then has been painted. And these are common among plains tribes, including here in Nebraska. And so the way that this parfleche is supported, because we don't want it to get rigid or fall into itself, it has what we call ethifoam inside. So all of the material that we use for our collection objects is inert, or it is non-acidic. And so by being inert, that means that it won't have any chemical reactions with the object that could cause it to deteriorate. And there are a lot of different things that can cause an object to deteriorate. Light damage is one. Dust has particulates, which is a big fancy word for saying that there are little tiny microscopic things that can hurt objects. And so that's why we have them in boxes or in cabinets. So for instance, this object isn't directly inside of a cabinet, but sits on top of one. And so we have it in a box so that it's safe from light damage. And we have the box made out of blue board, because blue board is inert and will not react in any way with the object. So it's basically a non-acidic type of cardboard that we have to specifically order. And this box has been custom made for this specific object. That way it fits it perfectly. And we have the ethifoam lining the inside of the box to make sure that it's not sliding around and that it's nice and cushioned and safe. The next object we have is a drum from Papua New Guinea. And so this has a bit more of specific needs because we can't stand it upright in a cabinet because we don't want all the pressure to be on one edge of the drum. And so we have it laying flat down. But we have it on this nice board with supports. That way, whenever we lift it, it will not move and we don't have to directly touch the object. We want to minimize touching as much as possible. And so we have carved ethifoam as needed to fit the contours of the drum, and we have it on each side. And then for the handle of the drum, we have it tied down with twill tape to make sure that nothing is moving whenever we move the object. There are other objects that also get specific trays rather than needing boxes. So for instance, this comb, which has been intricately carved, we have ethifoam buffers. It is held down with twill tape to make sure that it doesn't fall out, and we're able to put these in the drawers all together. One of the next things is another custom box that's been made out of blue board, so that inert type of cardboard, and we make sure that the numbers are on the outside so we know which ones are which. And this is actually an oil lamp. And so if we remove the object using our gloves, then you can see that we have specifically carved ethifoam to fit where the object is. So it's inlaid, but is also supported. That way, whenever we put it in the box, if we then put it into a cabinet and we were to have to pull out that drawer, it's not going to move. It's going to be perfectly safe. Another example of a tray is for the samurai face mask. So it's part of one full set of samurai armor in our collection. And as you can see, we have ethifoam supporting each part of the mask to make sure that it's not moving. And again, that tray is lined with ethifoam. So we want everything to be nice and cushioned and supported, and we want to minimize as much movement as possible because, again, we're pulling these things out of drawers or having to move them from one case to another or pull them out for a researcher. And so we want to make sure that whenever we are moving these objects, they are not moving as much as possible. That way we minimize how much damage might be done to them by accident. Some objects are so stable that they don't need support. So for instance, this winnowing basket, which is from California, has a flat enough bottom to where we can lay it flat into a drawer and it'll be fine on its own. However, there are other objects, even though they have flat bottoms, that might be more likely to move. And that's how we have these jars. So these are both from different pueblos in New Mexico. So these are made by different Native American tribes. And we have what are called pot rings on them. And so these are actually really easily made using backing rod, and they're connected. And so whenever it sits in the drawer and we have it in, it won't move back and forth. It sits perfectly still, which is very good whenever you have multiple of them in a drawer that you have to pull out. And so we have that for the large and the small. And some objects, like textiles, are a little bit more finicky. They can be stored in a bunch of different ways, and it just kind of depends on what the textile is or what it's made of, how big it is, if it's lying flat, or if it's a piece of clothing. And so our first example is this child's jacket. So this is from Plains tribe, and it's been heavily beaded. It's also beaded on the back. And as you can see, it's stuffed with tissue. And the reason we do that is to make sure that it doesn't get rigid and that it doesn't crease. Because whenever textiles lay flat on one another and they start to crease, they can break along those crease lines. So imagine whenever you fold your clothes in your drawer, if your clothes stayed there for a long time, they would start to get these really heavy wrinkles and could eventually crease and break depending on how fragile the shirt is. And so we have those stuffed full. Moccasins are another example. And so these are heavily beaded. And whenever it has all that weight on it, they tend to compress into themselves. And so we stuff them with stockinettes that have the inert material inside of them. And so that gives all the support to the beadwork to make sure that nothing's caving in, nothing's coming off, because whenever those beads start to compress against each other, it causes pressure that can be really damaging. Then some textiles lay flat. So this is a shawl, and it's from India, and it's actually covered in these little mirrors all the way through. And textiles like this that need to lay flat, they are layered together with acid-free tissue, and they are all layered together in a flat drawer. And so, again, with the creasing, we have extra padding where we have folded it over to make sure that there are no creases, no breakage, there's no undue pressure on the textile. And even other textiles get rolled. So rolled storage is a big thing that we do to try and save space and also make sure that they are housed properly. So this is a little rug, and it's wrapped around a glue board roll, and then we layer it with tissue, and on the outside is what we call Tyvek. Tyvek is also the same material that you'll see on the outside of houses, and so it's kind of the same thing. And then we have these, we want to tie it up, but we want to have the barriers here. That way the twill tape, which is this right here, doesn't create any creases. So it's all about eliminating any kind of crease or any kind of damage. And then we tie them closed, and we include a picture on the outside with the object's number. That way we know exactly which one it is, and we don't have to unroll it every time we want to see what it looks like. And the final thing I want to show you guys is our cabinets. So we do keep as many things as possible in cabinets because it's the safest place for them to be. It eliminates the chance at physically hurting them. Say if you had everything out on a shelf and were to knock into it, you might knock something off. So we want to have everything with closed doors, and we have these nice pull-out drawers so that we can reach everything in the back. And you want to make sure that nothing is too tall, otherwise they can get smushed whenever you push the drawer back in. And so as you can see in this drawer, not everything has an individual support because it doesn't need it. So smaller baskets like this, or things that might rock back and forth, those have supports on them. But the rest are fine as they are. But the big key to them is to make sure that we aren't crowding them and that they have enough space. You don't want to overcrowd your drawers, otherwise things start to touch, might rub up against each other, and it can cause damage as well. And so we try and keep everything as organized as possible, track where our things are, and take care of them as much as we can, because these are the objects that are entrusted to us, and we want to make sure that we have them for the public and for researchers for as long as we can. Thank you guys for joining me. I hope you learned something. Make sure to leave a comment below if you have any questions, and we'll make sure to answer them as soon as possible. Thank you.